So I'm sure we have all heard the quote before: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Today, I'm joined by a leadership expert and bestselling author of the book Begin with We, Kyle McDowell. Kyle is known for his inspirational approaches to transforming bosses into leaders and reshaping corporate cultures. His new book reflects on how today's society is plagued by a me-oriented mindset. And instead, Kyle is here today to show us how we can achieve more together. Kyle, happy to have you here. Looking forward to this. Welcome to the Define Success podcast.
Hey, Matt, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, can you kind of set the stage for us? You have a lot that has happened in your background that brought you to where you are today. Who is Kyle McDowell, and how are you this leadership expert that we know of today?
Yeah, man. So I've spent nearly 30 years in corporate America. I started at the ripe age of 18 years old, right out of high school, and managed to work my way through corporate America, leading bigger and bigger operations and teams throughout that journey. And ended up spending nearly 30 years, 28 to be exact. As a matter of fact, my 30-year anniversary to that first day in corporate America is in August of this year,
Oh, wow.
so right around the corner. But I spent a lot of time inside of corporate America, and for some context for your audience, the last role I had was with the largest pharmaceutical company, one of the largest in the world. I had 15,000 employees in my organization, a $2 billion budget. I ran the world's largest mail order pharmacy. Prior to that, I led one of the biggest federal service enterprises inside of the federal government, where I facilitated the enrollments of the Affordable Care Act and 1-800-Medicare. I had 14,000 employees there. It was a $7 billion program. I started from very humble beginnings inside of a cubicle at a regional bank, and just through kind of blood, sweat, and a little bit of tears, managed to take on bigger and bigger roles. And, I got to say, Matt, around year 22, 23 of my journey, I found myself becoming pretty apathetic towards many of the environments that I was actually responsible for creating. I felt like much of corporate America was broken, whether it be the toxic behavior that we've all heard about or seen so closely, or maybe even exhibited ourselves, to just the double standard that leaders had versus what their teams were allowed to do. And I told myself, man, if I ever had a chance to lead a little bit differently, lead in a way that I had never been led, I was going to take that and let the chips fall wherever they may. And, be careful what you wish for, because right around 2016, I was offered a role to lead 14,000 people in this big enterprise that had been kind of plagued with some toxic behavior. Not very, high performing, but at a cost. There was a lot of burnout, and people were just not their genuine, authentic selves. So the night before, so I took the role, but the night before I was to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders in that organization, I was in my hotel room and I had a bit of a gut check moment. It's like, all right, man, this is what you said you wanted. Now you've got the opportunity to lead differently. What are you going to do? I had no idea what I was going to say. So that evening, no exaggeration, probably around midnight, I took the laptop out and started typing. And I just was really intent on setting the stage for how the team should expect to be led by me, but also, probably more importantly, the things that they should hold me to, which they should hold me accountable. So I just started typing, man, and probably 2.5 hours later, I was left with 10 sentences in front of me. Each one of those sentences began and still begins with the word "we." Mm-hmm. And I'm not super creative, so I had 10 sentences. They each begin with "we," so I had the 10 we's. I stepped out in front of that group the next morning and said, guys, this is the set of rules that will kind of govern how we treat each other, because I really believe a high-performing team behind the scenes positions you for success externally for those that you serve, whether it be the customer or whoever it is. And the reception immediately was largely positive. There were some skeptics, but over the course of the next several months and now years, those principles are still the bedrock of and kind of ingrained in the cultural DNA of that organization. I left that company in 2019, and had another run in corporate America thereafter, where I also deployed the 10 We's and was met with really, really great success, big transformation taking place. And I found myself at a crossroads. Do I want to continue to transform inside of big organizations, or do I have a higher calling? And is that calling, and would that involve writing the book, evangelizing the principles, speaking around the world on these principles, and just trying to leave the world in a better place than I found it? And I chose that path. So I got out of the corporate fray in 2020. Took me a year and a half to write the book. It almost immediately became a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller, which is just mind-bending to me. And I've spent every day since then, literally every day since then, trying to get this message out as far and wide as I can, because I do believe it's my purpose. It's why I'm on this planet. Yeah, that brings us here.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And the 10 We's are amazing. We're going to go through some of them here today. But my first question, when you're talking about all this and workplace culture and everything, it's clear that a lot of cultures can get toxic. Why do you think so many people are afraid to speak up to enact change, or a leader to say, hey, something needs to be different here?
Yeah, I think it's pervasive, especially in large companies, really, really big companies, which, I've worked for 3 Fortune 10 firms.
Wow.
And I can tell you there's this just kind of overt focus, although they won't say it or admit it readily, on me. How I can get the next raise, how I can get promoted, how I can be recognized. I think that whole I thing that launched in the 90s with Apple and the iPod and the iPhone and so on, it permeated through our psyche in a way that I don't think many intended. And the result was people really focused on their individual success. And so that creates an environment where, for me to win, by default, someone else must lose,
right,
which is clearly not the case, especially in business. We're on a treadmill, so there's really no final destination. There's no finish line in business, so someone doesn't have to lose. So what happens is, there are optimistic people like me who feel like they want to lead in a way they've never been led. They want to get off that hamster wheel or that treadmill and do things a little differently. But for me to get that opportunity, I've got to conform to the ways that I've been led, conform to the old leadership playbook. So this cycle now abounds. And I see it all the time. An aspiring leader gets promoted. They want to do things differently. They want to drive change, but they feel kind of beholden to the old way of doing things because it's what got them in that position to begin with. So then what happens is the team is now, I had a peer who is now my leader. They're behaving in a way that is consistent with the old leadership, not the way they said they would lead us. So we're almost encouraged to lose our individuality, lose our creativity, lose our the diverse perspectives that make us unique and make us special. And then ultimately, we kind of sit on our hands because we don't want that. We have that fear of retribution, and I think fear is a strong word, but it's so widely seen inside of the corporate world that, it's easier just to put your head down, kind of clock in, clock out. But man, that's soul sucking. And there's no fulfillment, at least I found no fulfillment for me when I subscribed to that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's definitely not the right way to live. And a lot of people fall victim to that, get into these jobs. One thing about you and your experience, how did you go from, you said, working in a cubicle to now leading and helping all these organizations? What was that defining factor about you? Was it just getting the real world experience? Were you reading books, mentors? Like, how did you get to that high of a stage?
Man, I got to the point where I was really so let me be very honest and clear. The first 2 decades of my career were all about me and nobody else. At the expense of a marriage, even, it was all about me. But when I got that role I mentioned earlier, when I had the gut check moment, I was optimistic but skeptical if I would really find the fulfillment that I thought could be there.
Yeah.
I was just apathetic towards the whole thing. I think culture in many areas of corporate America is just broken. So when I took that gamble and rolled out the principles to that team, the reception that I received and how strongly it resonated with the team blew me away. And so much so that I am still in touch with members of that team many years later, still have one-on-ones on a monthly basis, checking in on their career journeys. They're helping me with mine.
Nice.
And that group they were the loudest group and the most kind of vocal encouraging me to take these principles worldwide, write the book, and go deeper. There's no magic formula. There's no secret sauce. I had to put aside the me orientation that I had led with and that had chartered my career, and exchange that for trying to help others find their success, helping others find their passion, fulfillment, and inspire them to reach that. Because I realized it was void for me. I didn't really get that a lot throughout my kind of growing up inside of corporate America. And I was overwhelmed with the impact that it had on me, not just professionally, personally. When you have a complete stranger, for example, and this happens almost weekly, has picked up the book and shared with me that the principles have changed not only their personal and professional lives, but how they raise their children.
Oh, wow.
Man, just like, it's the most humbling thing. So it wasn't an overnight thing for me. I didn't even, when I created the principles, I had no aspirations of writing a book. I had no pre-planning that this was going to be anything other than a speech the next day to my leadership team. But the way it was received, not only within that team, but subsequent teams, and now that I'm doing a lot of speaking and doing consulting, kind of evangelizing these principles, it's convinced me that the time is now, and there is an appetite for a transformation inside of most organizations. And I think principles and principle-based leadership is the key to that transformation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's beautiful right there. And let's get straight into these. There's a few that I want to point out and discuss with you, pick your brain about. The first one being, we do the right thing always. This is not always easy. A lot of people, they want to cut corners. They want to lie. They want to cheat people out of doing the right thing. Why is it so important to always do the right thing, even when it might not be easy?
Yeah, and it sounds so silly, right? It's almost too fundamental to be mentioned.
Right.
But I should note that of the 10 principles, they build upon one another. And if we can't agree to do the right thing as our first and primary principle right out of the gate, then the whole thing's a house of cards. Now, admittedly, what's right to you might be different than what's right to me. And I talk about, through the book, I talk about kind of a process to go through when trying to determine what the right thing is. But the Reader's Digest version is this: the right thing rarely involves satisfying, pleasing, or appeasing you. It's almost always for the benefit of the company, the client, or your crew, in any order. If you can nail all three of those, you've definitely hit the right thing. But the premise of your question, Matt, I think is so well formed. It's not always taken because it's not always the easiest, or it might be more costly, or it might take longer. But we all have this thing in the back of our mind, and I call it the mirror of truth, that we need to look into every single day to say, did I behave in a way that's consistent with my principles? Did I behave in a way that I'd be proud of if it was on the company newsletter, or even bigger, if it was on, any social media? Did I behave in a way that I said I did the right thing? And if we checked in with that mirror of truth more often, I think the results would be different. But it is easy to cut those corners at times. But I felt very strongly that must be the first principle, because if we can't agree on that, then there's nothing else to be discussed.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with that. Why is it such an important thing to know and really act upon? Like, you talk about having a conversation with yourself from an ethics standpoint, like making yourself feel good. But what about from the business standpoint? Is it more profitable to do the right thing? Like, I think of word of mouth marketing. If you have a good product, a good service, and you do the right thing, people are going to go tell other people. But if you wrong people, it's going to be negative word of mouth, or just no word of mouth at all. Like, how do you see it from a service or product standpoint by doing the right thing and helping grow that customer base?
Well, I think it's multidimensional. So if we do the right thing as an organization, we create a sense of loyalty with those that we serve, the product or service that we deliver. If we do the right thing, customers, our clients, they see that. If we do it on a team level, if we do the right thing at our team level, we know each other is subscribed to the same principle. We know they're not going to cut corners, even if it's easy. We know they're not going to cut corners, even if it's cheaper. And then if we do it individually, we know that there comes a sense of pride and fulfillment that comes with living that principle every single day. Man, I find myself living these principles way outside of the workplace. The silly example I use a lot is, you'll never catch me loading my groceries up out in the parking lot of a grocery store and leaving that cart in the parking lot. Right. It's not the right thing to do. Yes, there's somebody paid to go out there and get them, but I'm quite capable of walking that cart back, you'll catch me doing that every single time, even though no one's watching. So I think it's multidimensional, but as it relates to specifically to the business world, everyone wants to partner and do business with someone who is known for doing the right thing. We never want to work with someone that we're not sure if they're doing the right thing. So I tell people, do the right thing and publicize it, share it widely. Don't be shy about it. So I think there are myriad benefits that come with doing the right thing. It's just really zoning in and honing in on what the right thing is.
For sure. Yeah, that's great. Great advice right there. The next one I want to touch on is we lead by example. This is something that I find very important when you think about leadership. It's very hard to change people directly by telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do something. But if you can set the example, you have your own personal standards, you have your own routine that is bringing you your success, people will notice that and they're going to latch on. They're going to try to mimic that and do the same thing. That's what gets them to ultimately change. Leading by example, why is that so important to you?
Well said. Really well said, Matt. And the way that you've presented these first two we's is exactly the order of the 10 we's. The first is we do the right thing. The second is we lead by example. I'm convinced if I am on record saying I'm going to do the right thing, we are going to do the right thing. As a leader, the very first thing I can do to subscribe to that first principle is lead by example. Because leaders today, you're already setting an example. You are leading by example. It's your choice whether it's an example worth following or not. And I think a lot of people don't realize, and they're less purposeful about leading in a way that creates followership, but you nailed it, man. When you lead by example, you create a magnetism that pulls people along with you. If you're caught doing the right thing, if you're caught acting a way that you can be proud of, something that if your mother saw this, are you leading by example? If it's in the company newsletter, as I mentioned, is that an example you want to set? And it's tough. It's really tough to lead by example every single day. It doesn't necessarily mean leading by example doesn't mean you wear a starched shirt, shiny shoes, and the tightest suit and tie that you can. There are little things that lead by example that are really, really important. I'll give you a quick one. I used to run a location, or I had a location inside of my portfolio up in Virginia that had nearly 1,000 people inside this facility. And the men's room in one of those facilities was just overused. For whatever reason, the architects did not put enough restrooms throughout this facility. And invariably, every time I would use this restroom, I'd be washing my hands at the sink before I were to exit. And every single time, there was a half an inch to an inch of standing water on the countertop, every time. And it occurred to me one day as I'm washing my hands shoulder to shoulder with another fella, because there was invariably always someone else in there, because again, it was not enough restrooms. I thought to myself, me washing my hands and walking out of here is the same thing that everybody does, but it doesn't solve the problem of this wet sink or this wet countertop. So one day I said, I'm gonna lead by example. And I didn't do this consciously, but it just happened. I grabbed the paper towel after I finished drying my hands and I started wiping down that countertop. There was a fella next to me. Did it again. Next time I was in there, there's another fella next to me. And wouldn't you know it, the next time I returned to that location, that sink was dry. That counter was dry. I never said a word to anyone, never criticized the janitorial staff, never mentioned it to anybody else, but I did it so many times, I think others saw it, they played it forward or paid it forward, and then someone saw them do it, and it became kind of a thing. So leading by example doesn't have to be some profound act of leadership. It is picking up a stray napkin in the hallway as you walk through the office. It's taking your head out of your face, out of your phone to say hello to someone as they approach you in the office, because they're more important than what's going on your phone. So leading by example is just treating people in a way that recognizes their individuality and just doing the right thing.
Yeah, that's a great example right there. And when someone sees you wiping down the sink, they might be like, what is he doing? It's crazy. But then they're like, oh, maybe I should be doing something. There's almost a guilt inside you that's I'm not doing the right thing all the time. I should be stepping up and contributing. And that person was probably the next one that did it themselves and they showed someone else. So I think that's super important. I think of fitness. When you're doing a fitness class, the trainer, they're always kicking ass because they're in better shape. And then someone's like, oh, I got to stop resting. I got to keep up with this person. So leading by example just shows people what the potential could be and what could be done. I feel like.
That's exactly right. And, when I rolled these principles out, there were skeptics and I got pushback here and there. And every challenge, one of the we's is we challenge each other and we embrace challenge. For me to want the team and really push the team to be a real team instead of an org chart, I needed to be able to lead by example in a way that encourage them to behave in a similar way. So, it's not really on the leader only to lead by example. Anyone should lead by example. I think we all can and should lead by example because someone's always watching. There's always an opportunity to have an impact on someone else. And when you lead by example, by definition, if you're leading by example, someone is following, and that's important.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned you've been getting feedback about how people have been better with their kids because of your principles.
Yeah.
How do you lead by example with friendships, family? How does that help you in those arenas?
Yeah, I think it's consistency, right? And corporate America, in many ways, has taught us or encouraged us more subliminally than directly to be two different people. There's the person I am inside the workplace, which has a vocabulary that is completely different than the person I am outside of the workplace. I dress differently. We speak differently. I'm not naive. I'm not advocating crass language or swear words inside the workplace. But what I am saying is when we're consistent on both of those fronts and we live in a way outside of the workplace that is consistent with how we are inside the workplace, it's authentic. It creates fellowship. It's relatable. People know who you are. So for me to behave, and this was a profound kind of epiphany for me, man, because I kept work in my personal life very, very separate until I developed these principles and started to evangelize them. But then I realized I was being inauthentic at one place or the other. And people smell that. They sniff that out. They can tell if you're pretending to be something that you're not. So it allowed me, and it gave me almost an obligation, or else what? I'm not leading by example if I behave a certain way inside the workplace, live these principles, evangelize them. I'm the we guy. And then I leave the workplace and I'm some jerk who doesn't behave in a way that's consistent with that. So it forced me to be the same legitimate, authentic person in work and outside of work, which was something I never anticipated.
Yeah, that's really good right there. Next one, we take action. Taking action and making mistakes is okay. Being idle is not. Action is so important with achieving your goals. You always have to be making some progress, whether you're sprinting, walking, crawling from point A to point B. Why is action so important to you?
Well, so this is some. So there's an expression that you may have heard of. It's like if you see something, say something. I think the TSA uses that in airports and stuff, right? So inside of corporate America, there's this like not my job type thing. And we're always waiting for someone else to come up with the next big initiative or someone else to come up with the next whiz bang idea or process change that's going to make all of our lives easier. I've worked for some enormous companies, and there are tons of people inside of these companies, really bright people who over time have been told, don't raise your hand, don't speak up. Only the boss makes decisions. And that creates an apathy where all creativity is squashed and no one benefits. And we're now just stuck in mediocrity. So the teams that I've led, and when I speak about the principles, and part of the reason for writing the book is I want members of my team, when they see something, they do something.
Yeah.
They recognize an opportunity to get better and they take that opportunity to get better. Because I truly believe I would rather have members of my team say, hey, man, there's an opportunity to do that differently. They follow that path and they stumble mightily. We learn something. We're now better for that effort. So I would rather people take action to fix something and fail than just ignore it and look the other way, because we'll never get better that way. And Matt, you know as well as anybody, and you mentioned it earlier, we never advance. We never get better. There's no progress without struggle or challenge. And the only way to struggle or be challenged is to take action on something that has not previously been addressed. And there's a corollary, by the way, with we take action, and it's the next we own our mistakes. Because if I want members of my team to take action, to be bold, to be innovative, to do things differently, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to stumble. And we need to create an environment where when that happens, I can raise my hand and say, hey, boss, I blew it. I need some help, man. Can you come get me? Help me, pick me up. So I feel like if you're open about mistakes being made, people are more likely to take action. They're interwoven.
100%. Yeah. I think everybody going through like high school and college needs to hear this and understand it. It's a lesson that's better understood sooner rather than later. Get into a job or something, because the people that go above and beyond are the ones that are rewarded. The people that actually see something that needs to be done and they take action towards it, they're valuable to the workplace. I'm doing, as we're speaking this week, I've been doing interviews for an organization I'm a part of, hosting interviews for an intern that we're trying to bring on. And a lot of these interns, potential interns, are asking Is there potential to stay longer than the 3 months? Like, what is the, full-time position looking like? And I was like, well, I'll tell you what, as an intern, if you go above and beyond, if you go the extra mile, there's always a place for good talent. Like,
That's right.
we're not going to have someone that just stands idly by and doesn't do anything. That doesn't help the intern because they're not getting better. It doesn't help the organization because they're not getting any output. So it just makes sense for whatever role you're in and wherever you want to be, just always go the extra mile, always take action. And, like you said, if you see something, say something, do it.
That's so true. And for whatever reason, throughout at least my journey in corporate America, and I probably even led this way at one point, if I'm being completely honest. There's this false kind of narrative that only the good ideas can come from the boss, and only innovation can come from some other wild group that's in an ivory tower. It's not true, man. Like anyone, if you see an opportunity, express it, share it with your leadership, take action, own it, try to get better. Or you're just stuck in what I call a mediocrity sandwich, which is not a very tasty
Not
one.
fun. Yeah, nobody wants that.
No kidding.
Yeah, and I like how you point out the mistakes aspect of it too. Owning up to mistakes is critical because when you don't do that, there's no opportunity to grow. If you just push the blame on someone else or some factor that's outside of your control, like, you're not getting better. And I think a lot of people respect it when you just come to us. Like, I was working for you and just said, Kyle, I messed up, man. Like, you're going to respect me so much more than me saying, you know what, the weather wasn't great today, I just couldn't send that email. Like, there's no, there's no correlation. It's just an excuse.
So true. And Matt, I tell you, I've lived this one a long time. I don't judge people by their mistakes.
Yeah.
I really don't. I judge people by how quickly they remedy the mistake and if it's repeated. And if you create that environment inside of your team, if people know they're going to get beaten over the head when they make a mistake, they're not going to take action. They're going to go to this lather, rinse, repeat, cookie cutter way of doing things. Why wouldn't they? Because otherwise they know the risk is too high and they might end up be outside looking in, right? They might lose their job, worst case scenario. So, I think taking action is so tightly connected to owning mistakes. And, mistakes are really, as cliche as it sounds, they are seeds for growth. They are how we get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're data.
Yeah, they definitely are. And always opportunity to learn, to grow. Another one that I really like is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. Today's day and age, it's a very hustle culture. Everybody's kind of trying to one up each other with how busy their schedule is. And that's not always productive. What are you actually getting done? What goals are you achieving? Not many for some people. So why is this important to you?
Yeah, this one's actually kind of personal to me because I especially in the bigger organizations that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, there's this kind of like, keep your head down, don't cause too many weight, don't upset the apple cart, just kind of do as you're told. And in addition to that, so what that creates is an environment where no one wants to make a decision. Instead, we want to have a meeting, to have another meeting, to have another meeting, and there's this meeting malaise that takes over where we conflate our busyness with progress.
Yeah.
And I am just a firm believer that if you want to get something done, get a couple of people in the room, let's make a decision and let's go. But somewhere throughout the course of the corporate ecosystem, it's become more normal to reward people for doing a lot of things but not actually accomplishing anything. The example I love to give, and it's a little silly, but it's true. I am so thrilled when my Uber driver picks me up and he has a tank full of gas. I am so thrilled, but that's not why I'm paying him. I'm not paying him to put gas. I'm paying to get from A to B. So the activity to put gas in that car is really important, but it's not the be all end all. Getting the customer to their destination, that's the outcome. So I encourage people very, very concretely to say, if you find yourself engaged in activity, can you draw a straight line from that activity to a goal that you're assigned or an outcome that the team is chasing or something we're pursuing? And if you can't, you should question why. Now, I'm not naive, especially in big companies. There are compliance reasons, there are legal reasons, but by and large, I think so many times we get really mired in these activities because, a great example is recurring meetings inside of corporate America. We have a meeting and then another meeting. but no one ever stops to say, why are we here?
Mm-hmm.
And is this content something that is driving an initiative and delivering an outcome that we've been assigned? And if you can't point from A to B, then stop or reevaluate and see if we're doing the right thing, and maybe change who's in the room, change the cadence, or release the meeting entirely. But just activity for activity's sake is cancerous inside of an organization, especially when it doesn't lead to an outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And about the meetings, also the length of the meeting too. I think a lot of people, they just prolong it way too. If I get like a calendar invite for a meeting and it's over an hour, I'm just like, is this necessary? Like I follow an entrepreneur on Instagram, and she said the best tip she can give to a team is whatever meetings you have scheduled, reduce by 15 minutes. And if it's only 15 minutes to start with, you could probably do it over email or phone call. Just like stop wasting people's time. Just like get out and actually do the work. Don't just, sit there and waste time in so many long, pointless meetings.
I dedicated a significant portion of this chapter to meetings
Yeah.
because I do believe it's the biggest culprit of activity versus outcome. We get too many people in a room. We get scope creep talking about things that we weren't even really originally supposed to discuss. If so-and-so's not there, then we got to postpone and have another meeting or
Mm-hmm.
meeting before the meeting. There was a survey by Korn Ferry, and I think I did quote the stat in the book. It's like 60 something percent of respondents, and the respondents numbered in the thousands, said they would attend a meeting even if they knew it added no value to their day.
Wow.
Why? Why? Because that's that robotic
Yeah.
thing that inside of corporate America, you're not allowed to express dissent. You're not allowed to
Mm-hmm.
say, what are we doing here? What sense does this make? We just go along. We
Yep.
just go along.
That's what
And
we've
that's
always
why
done.
it's connected to taking action, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
if we see there's no value in this, we're not connecting activities and outcome, take action and do something different.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, that's perfect. Well summed up. So for anyone listening to this that's in too many meetings, stand up, and it's time
That's
to make
right.
some change for sure.
Amen.
The last one I want to go over with you is We Embrace Challenge. You talked
Yeah.
about this a little bit, touched on it. Why is challenge so important to you?
Well, so the premise, or the we just before we embrace challenge, is we challenge each other.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and you touched on it very eloquently earlier, Matt. Whether it's fitness, whether it's learning a new language, anything that you are not comfortable doing today and you want to get comfortable doing is only going to happen after you overcome one or more challenges.
Yeah.
So if we're in a team environment, whether it's a sports team, whether it's a team inside of corporate America, whether it is the chess team, the only way we get better is by recognizing a challenge, embracing that challenge, and getting better through the experiences of embracing that challenge. So I want to create a team, an environment inside my team where we are really comfortable challenging each other. And quickly, what I mean by that is, I want people on my team to challenge one another. I want them to challenge me because I'm going to challenge them. I want challenges, omnidirectional, if you will, up, down,
Mm-hmm.
and sideways. But if I expect that to be part of our DNA, I have to create the next we embrace challenge, because encouraging challenge, but not encouraging the embracing of challenge, is anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the challenge comes externally, whether it comes from me to you, you to me, we must embrace challenge. And when we do embrace challenge, that's when the real progress is made. That's when we step out of mediocrity. And that's when we find real fulfillment, because we've done something different. We've overcome something, and you can't overcome it without embracing it. There's what's that expression? You must be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another way of saying I've got to embrace challenges, or else I'm just never going to advance. The unforeseen benefit of these two we's that I did not anticipate was how they became part of the daily vernacular inside of my teams. Where, so Matt, you and I could be in a staff meeting. Let's say we're peers, for example, and you're giving the boss all of your updates, and you mentioned something that doesn't quite register with me. It doesn't make sense. You are obligated in this environment to say, well, hang on, Matt, because when I saw X, Y, and Z go down, it wasn't quite the way you explained it. But what happened is it goes inside the vernacular. So I will preface that question or my position by saying, hey, Matt, we challenge each other, right, man?
Mm.
And I would watch people's shoulders kind of drop they were comforted, they were calm. They knew they weren't being attacked.
Yep.
Because in my world, a challenge must come from one of two places: data or experience, not opinion, because opinions, everybody has those, and,
Yep.
and they're not helpful at times. They can be, but if it's grounded in one of those two, you're definitely on the right path. So for us to ask a question or challenge someone with those two filters in mind, and you've already subscribed to the principle of we embrace challenge, there's no way to not get better.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. And it's so interesting because a lot of people view and feel challenge differently. Some people might encounter challenge and they, just want to lay in bed and sulk all day because they can't handle it. What would you say to someone who's, feeling down about themselves because of a challenge? It's hard for them to get back up and get back to work. And how do you get them back moving forward and learn from that challenge?
Yeah, man. If I had the answer to that for all scenarios, I'd be a very wealthy man.
Yeah.
Right. It's because when you're in that dark place, it's hard to recognize that it's temporary, and it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
recognize that this is just part of life. Life is hard. Because if it were easy, we wouldn't have challenge. We wouldn't overcome challenges, and the satisfaction that comes with overcoming those challenges can be so profound. So I think, in that specific scenario, the question that you ask, I think it's important for that person to recognize the scenario that they're going through is almost always temporary. The light at the end of the there is, as cliche as it sounds, there really is light at the end of the tunnel, but you must take that first step. Running a marathon doesn't happen by all steps happening at once. You must take the first step, and that might just be get out of bed. It might just be get out of bed, get moving a little bit, maybe get some sunshine on your face, but you must start embracing that challenge with one step at a time. Because the longer you wait, the longer that road back to
It's
happiness becomes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Great advice right there. Well, I will say if anyone wants to learn more about these principles, more in depth, definitely get the book, Begin with Weak. I'll have a few more questions for you. My first one being, how do you define the word success?
Wow. Wow. So my answer today is actually very different than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago. So
Mm-hmm.
my answer to defining success today is how much or the impact that I've had on others.
Yeah.
I know it sounds a little cliche and maybe unicorns and rainbows, but I'm at a point in my life at this point of my journey that my greatest source of satisfaction comes from helping others achieve their goals, helping
Mm-hmm.
others be better than they were yesterday. So I feel an enormous amount of success when I work with, whether it be a client or I hear from someone who's read the book, or in one of my businesses where someone has achieved something that they didn't think they could, or they've reached a pinnacle that they never thought they could even think about achieving. That to me feels like success. And the reason I say it's different is because to me, success was the cliche answer that everybody likes to give. And that's, I want to be happy and have a lot of money. And I'm sure that is the definition for many. It's not for
Yeah.
me any longer. To me, my impact and my level of success is directly connected to the number of people that I help them achieve their goals.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that. And you've definitely achieved that to a high degree with the book, with coaching, with speaking, all those different avenues. So, my next question for you would be, what makes you successful, but other people not? What is that defining factor about you?
Wow. I think it's a number of things. I've always been the type of person that when I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. As a matter of fact, you and I were chatting about this
Mm-hmm.
before we went live. It's like I'm really excited about personally starting a podcast, but I know that I do not have the bandwidth today to do that consistently, and I'll just end up stopping it.
Mm-hmm.
So I am very purposeful that when I take something on, I write this accountability contract with myself that I'm never going to stop doing this
Yeah.
until I know it's the right time to stop. So I've always been one to, when I said I wanted to go to business school, I didn't want to go to any business school. I applied to one business school. I applied to the number one business school in the world. I wanted to do that. I wanted to go to that business school. When I decided to start evangelizing these principles, I thought the best way to do it was to write a book. I didn't want to write any book, didn't want to do just an ebook. I wanted to write a bestseller. So I think jumping in with both feet and being very purposeful about the path. I think most of us sleepwalk through our lives, especially sleepwalk through our careers. So I think being purposeful about going left, going right, recognizing when the universe has opened up an opportunity for you, taking advantage of that opportunity, and being mindful about where you are on that journey. And I'll boil it down to this. I often said yes when a lot of people would say no.
Mm.
I was rarely a glasses half full guy when given an opportunity to take on a new task inside of work, or maybe take a job that I wasn't super comfortable or confident that I'd be excellent at, but I still jumped in with both feet, because I felt like saying no was kind of a cowardly thing. So I wanted to be proactive and take on those challenges throughout my life. Um, so yeah, I think it's jumping in with both feet, and then just saying yes when maybe I shouldn't have said yes.
Yeah.
But I really believe all things work out for a reason, and the universe has a plan for us. It's just recognizing that plan and working with the universe for it to happen.
Awesome. That's great stuff right there.
Yeah.
Kyle, before my last question, where can people find you on Instagram, find the book, all those different things?
Yeah, man. So all my socials are the same, at Kyle McDowell Inc. My website is kylemcdowellinc.com, and you can find me on pretty much any platform.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, my last question for you would be, if there's someone listening to this that they feel lost, they want to achieve success, but they don't know where to go, what success means for them, what piece of advice would you give that person and leave them with today?
Yeah, for me, well, everyone's different, right? And that's situational. For me, the biggest change of my entire life came when I took the time to write down the principles that I wanted to live and lead by. Because Matt, I don't know if you realize this, a principle by definition is a fundamental truth. It's something we hold to be true. It's our system of beliefs. And when I wrote these principles down, I now felt as if I'd made a commitment to myself. I must live these principles. So if someone's struggling to find success, or they're at different spots of their journey, I would really encourage you to take a step back, be purposeful, go to a quiet place, and take a pen and paper, your phone or whatever, and jot down the things that you hold to be true, your principles. How do you want to be known? What do you want to be known as? What is your legacy going to be? And allow those principles to insulate you and create the ability to live those things that you just established. But it doesn't come by accident. No one's going to give them to you, and no one's going to grab your hand and lead you to success. You must be purposeful about it. You must be. And that starts with you and you alone, not allowing anybody else to determine what your success is.
That's amazing, because it's powerful. The tools and the principles are there. You just need to dig them up and take some action.
That's it, man. Well said. Exactly
Awesome.
right.
Yeah, well, appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us today. Definitely, appreciate this conversation, all the value you had to provide. So thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure, Matt. You're doing good work here, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to join you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.